Welcome to the Native Diamond Podcast.
Oh, shit! What you waiting for?
Please don't forget to like the video, hit subscribe, ring the bell. That way you're notified every time I drop a new episode of Native Diamond Podcast. What's going on, my dudes? Seth Mick here. This is Native Diamond Podcast. And today I have a special guest. I have Zach from Common Choir.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm stoked to be here. Super stoked.
So I basically start off every episode with icebreaker questions. We'll go ahead and jump into those. You just say the first thing that comes to mind.
Will do.
All right. First question, Pearl Jam or Grape Jam?
Ooh, Grape Jam for sure.
Song you know all the lyrics to?
10 Signs You Can Leave by Emmure.
Sick Breakdown or Sick Solo?
Sick Breakdown.
Weezer or Wheezy F Baby?
Just because it's gotta be Weezer, I guess.
Cake the Distance or Social Distance?
Right now, social distance, very important.
Stone Cold Steve Austin or Cold Stone Creamery?
Texas Rattlesnake all day, baby.
The Police, the band, or the Police?
By far, Police the band, man. Come on, that's no question.
Xena the Warrior Princess or Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Buffy. For sure, Buffy.
Sonic the Hedgehog or Super Mario?
Sonic, no question. I have every Sonic game. I still have my Genesis. For sure, Sonic.
Circle Pit or Wall of Death?
Circle Pit, for sure. Less medical bills involved.
I don't know if you drink, but IPA or stout?
Oh, I do drink, and I'm stout for sure.
Any stout in particular?
There's a local brewery here in Minneapolis where I live and where Common Choir's from called Dangerous Man. They make a peanut butter porter stout. It's super good and the price hasn't changed in like 5 years. They were like a brewery before breweries really became like commonplace. So
Okay.
It's super cool and super, super good quality. And they don't distribute, so you can only get it there.
Sick. So shout out to peanut butter porters around the world.
Yee.
Most overrated metal band?
First thing that comes to mind is probably like Black Veil Brides or something like that. Or Asking Alexandria, maybe.
Mhm.
A lot of
Right.
those radio rock-esque bands. I think that's really what grinds me.
Warped Tour or Ozfest?
Warped Tour for sentimental value, for sure.
Van Halen or Steve Vai?
Probably Van Halen. Gotta love the party jams.
Homer Simpson or Peter Griffin?
Homer, for sure. Homer's my boy. Shout out to your Zoom background.
Yeah, I was actually watching all the Simpsons predicts last night.
Oh, really?
It was awesome. Yeah, they did Trump and they called like people not getting their tax money back. It's like a lot of shit that's going on right now. Pretty
That's
crazy.
so nuts. I want so bad to buy into that. Like, I'm probably gonna have to dig into it more after this. It's so crazy, all the coincidences that you see get pointed out.
It's crazy. Like they had the Killer Dolphins last night. I was just laughing because everything is so relevant, and they called it. Like they called the shit, and it was 99. They called it 99. Which one would you rather have? 6-pack abs or a 6-pack of beer?
6-pack O beer.
Most hated Thanksgiving side dish?
I absolutely loathe that cranberry jelly stuff that everybody serves.
Yeah, dude.
I can't vibe with that.
I feel you. It's just all artificial and shit.
Yeah,
So acoustic set or full band?
full band always.
Most annoying band ever?
You know, for the longest time, I would have always said Attila would have been my answer to that. But, you know, I'm actually beginning to appreciate Franz and just their approach more and more. So
Mhm.
I'm going to say historically, my answer is Attila, but I also love them for it at the same time. So
That's
take
awesome.
that for what it's worth.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because it's very much a love-hate thing. But if you can kind of see past the antics, you like understand it's just a ploy.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so my last one, it's a fuck, marry, kill type thing. Kim Kardashian, Lady Gaga, Ellen DeGeneres.
I'm going to marry Lady Gaga, bang Ellen, and I'm going to kill Kim Kardashian.
Sick. That was good answers, man. So that's all I got for the icebreakers. Thanks for playing. It's a good warm up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Dig it.
What have you been up to since all this stuff has been going on?
Well, with Common Choir, it's been interesting because we literally just released our most recent EP right before all like the COVID stuff really started hitting the fan. So the plan was, we were going to be on the road. We were going to be playing a bunch of shows regionally. We had a bunch of really big ones booked locally even that we were super excited for. And obviously we can't take advantage of any of that now for the foreseeable future. Mostly we've been writing new music, really working on developing our relationship with our online audiences, right? Especially because you can't be live anywhere and we can't meet new people any other way. We shot and released a new music video a couple weeks ago that's up on YouTube for our song Of Rust and Rot.
I'm gonna have to check that out. I was banging that EP last night. It's really good. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
So, have you been watching any TV shows lately?
So my fiance and I have been watching Ozark over again because season 3 just came out on Netflix. We rewatched it from beginning all the way up to that. We haven't finished it yet, but we're pretty amped on that. I've always been super crazy about Westworld and True Detective on HBO. So I rewatched all of Westworld twice already since we've been locked in. I'm going to start watching True Detective again. So mostly season 1 because it's, the sickest flex, but they're all pretty good.
Do you listen to any podcasts?
I've been getting into a Lead Singer Syndrome with Shane Toll from Silverstein is super good. I've been listening to Managemental by Mike Mowery and the other guys from Outer Loop. It's super, super interesting, just to hear about the economics of the music business on the higher end, right? Being a smaller band is obviously considerably different, but at the same time, it's good to know how things are working above us because that kind of lets us know how to traverse, what we're going to run into when we're working with all these tours and different things like that.
Have you been listening to any new music lately?
Been jamming a pretty good amount of, this morning, actually, Misery Signals put out a new song, which I'm super amped about. It's awesome. Definitely worth listening to for anyone that likes just metalcore in general, I think. And I've always loved Misery Signals anyway, so I'm predisposed, but it's a great song. And then the new Emmure I've been listening to, that made me kind of go down a bunny trail too, where I was listening to a lot of their old stuff and just reappreciating it because I had a huge disconnect where I stopped liking them for a while after Felony. So Slave to the Game and some of those other records, I never really listened to them. So now I'm kind of going back and looking at the stuff that I feel like I underappreciated at the time. There's a local band here in Minneapolis called By the Thousands that's signed to Stay Sick that just put out a new record and it's super good. I've also been listening to that.
I had a request on Twitter. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, but they wanted you to scream on the spot.
Actually, no, I can because I thought my fiance was on a web chat too, but she's not.
Sick. Thank you so much. So whoever shouted that out on Twitter, I hope that makes your fucking day.
Word up to you because I haven't used my actual stage voice in a long time.
For sure, man. I can't wait till I start seeing bands just going playing shows again, but I think it's going to be a while, unfortunately.
I believe the same. I mean, all the major outlets are saying 2021, right? So it's unfortunate, but
yeah, it's very unfortunate. So what are your influences with your music?
For Common Choir or even just what I do in general and how it plays into what the band does, I would say for direct line of music is Misery Signals or Counterparts, general metalcore bands where we're not any polar extreme on any certain side, right? Not super obnoxiously heavy, but not super melodic either. Floating in between, I think has always been a place where I write and where kind of my voice fits well and the lyrics that I write are kind of fit that kind of vibe a little bit more. Just because I feel like it gives me a little bit more freedom to roam around and talk about more different things. Obviously, if you're a really good writer, you could write a love song over a deathcore track, but I don't know that I have the depth and talent to do that. So it's cool for me that musically it gives me a broader range.
I can see Counterparts now that you said that, actually. That's really sick, dude.
I love them too.
Oh, yeah. What's your favorite Counterparts album?
Honestly, by far, I would say You're Not You Anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I've been listening to that a lot. I've always liked the older stuff, and I've always been able to cherry pick, The Difference Between Hell and Home was an awesome record also. But I really feel like You're Not You Anymore kind of brought all the things I love the most about Counterparts and compressed them. So it's like every track is just a banger, one after the other after the other. Like that's the level of musicality and like as a vocalist, the type of stuff that I aspire to want to do. Like if I could attain what they have going on there, man, that would be my dream.
They definitely hold a huge candle in the scene.
No doubt.
So what were some memorable albums for you growing up?
So I grew up in Iowa, getting into metal as a kid. Slipknot's Iowa was in fact very, very important to me.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird and really scattered. So I definitely wasn't always really into heavy music. Circus Survives, Juturna was really big for me. Seosin's first record, or EP, I suppose, with 7 Years and Third Measurement in C and all those songs on it. That was huge for me. I would say also definitely Emmure, Goodbye to the Gallows. That first one on Victory was huge. Like when I heard that, I was like, okay, this is like heavy music that I could play. And like, I get it. And the writing style was very like connective.
You know, it's always a shot in the dark when I bring people on the show as far as like if we have the same music taste or not. But dude, you're like right up my alley as far as like what I'm into.
Hell yeah. It's weird because like I always have the same thing, and like meeting people playing heavy music, it's always like you meet someone and they're very pigeonholed directly into only heavy music, or then you get the people who've kind of been involved with multiple layers of the scene from different angles, you know?
Yeah.
It's so, yeah, I mean, basically all I'm saying, it's a really long way to say I get exactly what you mean.
I get it. You know, with my podcast, when I first started this thing, I was kind of all over the place. I'm not going to lie. Do you follow like Punk Rock NBA?
Oh yeah, of course. I love all Finn's videos are awesome. I love that stuff.
Dude, so Finn inadvertently inspired me because he said something on his show and I was like, you know what? I want to do my own thing, you know? And basically in one of his latest videos, he was like, you know, you need to double down on what your fan base is, you know? And a lot of the people that follow me are really into metalcore, deathcore. And I mean, that's my thing too. So I was like, you know what? I'll steam ahead with metalcore now. I just figured, you know, I feel like it's lacking in that department, in my opinion, as far as like podcasting and stuff like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. And I think it's interesting because to me, actually, there's a little bit of like a resurgence in the music scene right now, especially for like metalcore type music, as opposed to like being like a super extreme deathcore band or like the math rock, indie rock thing that got really big for a long time. It seems like there are more bands that are kind of broaching that middle ground again. It's kind of like the past coming back again, right? You know how they say fashion cyclical and all that. I feel the same thing's happening a little bit with music now. So I think you're perched perfectly to catch that wave and, you know, help people develop that understanding or get some visibility in that too. Yeah,
because something that kind of upset me a while ago, I'm not gonna lie, but like you know, Warped Tour kind of coming to an end, man, that really hurt, honestly. That was a good way for people to get exposure to bands that they would never fuck with or never even get to know. You know, I was just like, man, there's no platform for that. And that's kind of why I started the podcast. Not that I'm going to save metalcore. It's going to save itself. But I wanted to be a platform so people could get to know different bands, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, live shows, huge part of the scene, as we mentioned. What were some memorable live shows that, you know, you saw growing up?
So many. I mean, I've been really fortunate in that, I've been playing music for a long time and I've been in a lot of bands. So, I mean, basically, I lived in California when I was in early elementary school going up through middle school. One show in particular that really like made me really want to start playing music was The Devil Wears Prada came through on tour right before they signed to Rise Records and released Dear Love, A Beautiful Discord, their first record. They played with another Sacramento local at the time, which was Dance Gavin Dance. They were nobody back then. Whatever I Say Is Royal Ocean EP hadn't even been out yet. So they played with a bunch of other locals, one called Destroy the Track Runner, a couple others. And that was the first show I ever went to alone, like kind of as an adult, even though I wasn't an adult per se. I was like 13 or 14. It was hugely impactful on me just to see like all the energy and the way that they interacted with the crowd and just like the whole vibe of the show as a whole just really struck me. And I was like, that was a moment when I was like, this is what I want to do.
Right.
This is my thing. So like, I literally like that week went and started a band. And, you know, from there, a lot of my biggest shows that I've gotten to see, I've also been a part of, which has been, you know, pretty fantastic for me. So like the next time the Devil Wears Prada came through town, you know, my band opened for him because I was dead set on that's what I was going to do. So, you know, different stuff like that. I saw Emmure in Iowa City on a really big tour with them, Whitechapel, A Girl, A Gun, A Ghost, a couple other bands were on it. A local from Indiana called Salt the Wound played.
Oh, okay, yeah.
They were amazing. And that Emmure show went fucking nuts. Like it was just insanely crazy. It was like a 250 cap room and there were easily 300 people inside.
Oh,
and we were all just like stacked on top of each other. Like everyone was constantly mic diving and stage diving to get off. People were hanging off the rafters in the ceiling because it was a low ceiling venue. It was just like all the chaos and energy that you expect when you think of a crazy underground music show. Like it was actually, it could have been a scene in a movie. For sure.
That's awesome, dude. I'm a huge Devil Wears Prada fan. They were a staple for me growing up, for sure.
No doubt.
What's your favorite album EP by them?
For the longest time, I thought it was either the first one or Plagues. But now I'm actually getting super into, I don't know what the newest record's called or the one that has all the newest singles on it, but the stuff they're releasing right now, I believe is by far their best work. It's like, they just keep getting better. It's crazy. I mean, for like overall impact as a record, maybe Plagues, just because by then I knew them well enough to be obsessed with the entire record before I even heard it, which forced me to memorize it then and listen to it way too much.
That's awesome, dude. I really appreciate that because no one ever talks about that Devil Wears Prada on the show. And that's like my favorite, one of my favorite groups for sure.
They are pioneers in like metalcore and underground music. I mean, just look at their staying power, right? Like if you look at the scene as a whole, like tastemakers and stuff, you know, something that, you know, maybe punk rock MBA would say. You look at tastemakers and the way they treated the Devil Wears Prada back when they were first getting big, everyone was like, oh, these guys are lame. They're never going to amount to anything. And now they're like legendary status, right? Like everyone aspires to be that.
Definitely. Where exactly did you grow up? You mentioned Iowa and California. So like, where was your mainstay?
So like I said, I grew up in my younger years in California. I lived with my dad until the middle of middle school, like right before getting into high school. Then I moved to Iowa to live with my mom. I always had kind of a rough time in California. It was a much bigger city than all the places that I'd ever been in Iowa, which is where I would normally spend my summers with my mom. I lived in a more economically impoverished area, not a very nice area right outside of Sacramento. I didn't really have a lot of opportunities to, I guess, do well, or I just didn't feel comfortable a lot of times. So I moved to Iowa to get a simpler, more straightforward life. Plus I had a ton of friends there from going there during the summers who I kept really in contact with, like via AOL Messenger and MSN and stuff like that back in the day, MySpace. So I felt like I just had more friends there. And especially since I wanted to do music, you can't really do that without a support system around you. So I thought that's where I should be. Then I spent all the way up until I graduated high school, I lived in Iowa. Then I immediately moved to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I joined a band. We played a lot of shows. We toured around a little bit. We got signed to a small label. Then we broke up and I moved back to Iowa. Now I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota in Common Choir. So
I'm originally from California, kind of like Sierra Nevadas. I'm actually from like Lake Tahoe.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah. Similar kind of story. I've kind of moved back and forth from California to North Carolina where I am now. I live like basically in Charlotte. Yeah, same thing. Like my mom lived here, my dad lived there. So I totally get that. Would you attribute like a broken home with kind of you getting into heavier music?
Maybe. I know, so for me, a lot of what I have written about or reflected on in my music has certainly been centered around that. For example, with Gravemind, our newest EP that's out right now, the title track is basically completely about my family and how I believe in retrospect its effect on the way I think about things and the way I look at the world. So it's not really like a feel sorry for me kind of thing, but it is a self-actualization thing. So yeah, I mean, I would say that that's probably had a really big impact on things overall, right? And certainly finding a family within the music scene is something that I think is really important and I've talked about a lot, because all my best friends in the world, all people that I've known now for 12 years continually, who are closer to me than 90% of my blood relatives are, people I met through music. So, for me, it's super important. And yeah, I would say it's probably derived from that.
So like, what's the most like Minnesota thing that you can think of?
Probably... So there are some people up here that have really thick accents that I don't have, and I pick up on relatively easily because I'm not from the area inherently. There are a lot of people up here that when they say like bag or tag, it's like bag or tag,
Oh, yeah.
like an elongated A sound, which is really interesting. And when I was in the band I was in Milwaukee, I had a guitar player who was from Green Bay, and he had almost the exact same thing. So instead of saying like toast, he would say like toast, like you want some toast.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was always funny. So that's probably the most Minnesota thing I can think of, like right offhand.
I just wanted to know. I haven't yet ventured that way, and one day, hopefully, I will. So I just wanted to see what's going on up there.
I would say, people do say Minnesota nice for a reason. Everyone is really, really nice. I mean, obviously, in any city, you're going to just have jerks, right? That just exists. But it seems that people really go out of their way to try and be polite up here in as many ways as they possibly can. I think I've seen that certainly more here than I ever saw in California, even in Iowa and a lot of places.
Yeah, for sure. North Carolina is kind of strange. It's kind of like a melting pot. People from New York and Florida, you get everyone in between. The Southern hospitality thing isn't really relevant here. It just depends on who's from here, you know?
Yep.
So are you guys into the sports teams up there or not?
I'm actually getting into it a little bit. I'm not a huge football fan. So for me, the Vikings it doesn't matter. I don't pay attention to that. But I have been getting into hockey a little bit. And my fiance and I have been to a few games. So I'm really digging the Wild. Although by proxy, most of my close friends are Chicago Blackhawks fans. So I definitely want to go to Blackhawks games too in Chicago. I think maybe a lot of that roots from being from Iowa too. Since they don't have professional sports there, I can always kind of be a floater, right? I don't have a geographic loyalty.
So Iowa, was that more of like a football town? What was their sports thing?
Everyone likes most sports there. I'd say like hockey is probably less important in Iowa than it is in Minnesota or Illinois even. But yeah, I'd say football and baseball mostly. You know, once again, since there's no professional team there, you're either watching college in Iowa or you like one of the adjacent states teams. So like a lot of Chicago Cubs fans, like as far as baseball is concerned, I'm probably a Cubs fan because the Twins are terrible and they always do bad. So there's not a lot to root for. And I've been to more Cubs games. I've been to like 8 Cubs games in my life. So I got to give it to them.
I've maintained being a Giants fan all these years. My dad's from San Fran, so it's one thing that we have in common.
San Francisco's tight.
Yeah, dude. Where did the name come from? I'm curious.
Common Choir. So I came up with Common Choir when I was like spitballing to myself a bunch of different ideas based around kind of what I write and how I think. So one of those things was I thought to myself often, like, it seems like I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, right? A lot of the stuff that I talk about isn't necessarily inaccessible. And I feel like a lot of people can relate to it in a lot of different ways. I was like, man, preaching to the choir, what makes sense? And I'm like, well, if you're preaching to the choir, you're saying something that's like commonly accepted, right? So then I kind of just smashed those two ideas together and Common Choir came out. I also think of it as like an adjective for like, you know, regular dudes not pretending to be anything else, right? Like we play music and we do our best, but at the end of the day, we're all normal people.
I love that take. Did you form the band or like you and another friend? How did that come about?
Well, so I was new to Minnesota because I moved up here actually for work. And I was looking on Craigslist for people who play music because I didn't know anyone in the area whatsoever. I'd never met a single person. And I found that there was like a kind of defunct band was looking for a singer. So I hit up the guy on Craigslist and I met up with them and I met now what are, I guess, remaining is only one person from that original group of people. But originally Common Choir started from 4, including me, of those people that were in that room at that time. They were trying to put together their old band and they had music pre-written and everything, which is what I kind of like auditioned with. But after we talked back and forth for a while, they offered me the position and I just posed the question like, hey, do you guys just want to start fresh? Something brand new. Like we'll write brand new music. We won't recycle anything. We'll get a new name and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of where Common Choir came from.
That's really cool. I don't know you saying that. I know you're not like asking Alexandria guy or whatever, but something like popped in my head. But like the new stuff that they're doing, I feel like they should have changed their name and kind of started anew because it has nothing to do with like what they have done in the past. And it's like pissing so many people off. Like if you go on Twitter, everyone's smashing them now. Do you think that's like necessary sometimes to start new?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes there has to be a line in the sand, right? Like creatively, like, you know, if you turn over the entire roster of members, for example, right? Like if every person is new to the band, and there's no founding in this case, like let's say Asking Alexandria. I don't know if that's the case with them, but if everyone was brand new and no one was original, then it definitely makes sense to do something like that in that scenario. Or like if your music takes a total like 180, right, and you're going a completely opposite direction, and maybe even the idea or the fundamentals of the band shift. If something like that happens, then I feel like it's good to give a name change to like signify like the new era going forward, right? I know like from a business perspective, it's hard to think about changing a band name, especially if you've actually accomplished something that requires keeping like that. But to the same degree, I think it kind of takes away the integrity of the old stuff if you don't recognize how different the future is going to be.
Interesting. I like your take on that. So I had to ask you this question. Did you go through any embarrassing phases as a teenager?
Oh, I mean, didn't we all?
Yeah.
But, in my early days involved with the scene, obviously, I had the whole like scene bangs, multicolored hair, which I kind of am doing now. Actually, this is a new quarantine development for me, just because my fiance and I were bored, and some of my friends on a web chat told me I wouldn't do it, so I proved them wrong. But yeah, I had the whole like super forward hair, rocking the girl pants, because there were no such thing as like tight-fitting jeans for dudes back then, studded belts, all that stuff for sure. I never got any piercings, so I never had snake bites or anything like that. A lot of my friends did. I was a little bit more conservative with puncturing my flesh for whatever reason, so I never crossed that line. But I was definitely like typical Seenie Beanie, like mallcore looking kid back in the day.
Every band creator starts off with, zero, obviously. So how long did it take before you guys started catching traction?
Common Choir, I think, got a pretty good reaction pretty much right out the gate. I mean, so I would say like we existed writing our music and everything for probably 6 months. And then we played our very first show. And we played our very first show the day before we went to go record our very first EP, which was called Self-Inflicted Famine. And it was a 4-song EP that we recorded in Chicago at a place called The Nook, which is where like Oceano has recorded there. A bunch of other like new metal bands have been there, like Soilwork and other people like that. But we put out the EP and we got a pretty positive reception right away. But then that plateaued for a really long time. And until we started releasing these songs that are on Gravemind now, I feel like we didn't really start to like see growth. Now with the music videos and the new EP, we're getting a lot of new people approaching us and saying like, hey, we like what you do. We're interested in working with you, all this different stuff. So that's kind of cool that it's working in phases, although I've never been disappointed with the way people have approached us at any point.
What was the biggest show that you guys remembered playing together?
It's probably arguable. There's a couple different shows that are probably like really neck and neck. One of our very biggest shows ever that we played was actually an all local show here in Minneapolis with a band that's some friends of ours called Throw the Fight. They're relatively, they're like a little bit more radio rock friendly, a little bit screamo, but super awesome, super talented guys. And then we played, also another band played called 3 Pill Morning, who's another local from this area. And they're like straight up like rock. But we played at a place called The Caboose, where a lot of big tours come. So like Summer Slaughter goes through there. We played that. We literally filled that whole venue, and it was all locals. Like it was like 450, 475 tickets were sold for that show.
That's pretty big.
Yeah. So like that's like when we played with Miss May I at the same venue, it was Miss May I, Memphis May Fire, and a couple other bands. And there were only like 330 tickets sold for that show by comparison.
Wow, dude. That's awesome. Have you guys like toured a lot, or have you stayed local?
Common Choir hasn't really done any touring, not in the formal sense. Like we've gone and we've played shows that are very far away from home. Like we'll go up to 6.5, 7 hours away from where we live, and we'll play 1 show or 2 shows, but we haven't actually done a formal tour yet, which is, kind of funny, because it'll be like, sometimes we'll go play a show 6 hours away, then we'll play another show that's 3 hours away, and then we'll wait another week, and then we'll do the same thing. So it's like, to a certain effect, it's the same idea. We've got a van, we've got a trailer, we could do it all. We just haven't coordinated it correctly. And we were really waiting for Gravemind, which is out now. And theoretically, we'd be doing some of that stuff right now. The world is what it is.
That's very disappointing. Even though it's very kind of limited, I guess, Like, are there any road stories that you would like to share?
I've got a decent one that's from pre-Common Choir. This was a previous band a little bit before Common Choir. We were on a tour through the Midwest. We played in Omaha, and we were going down to Missouri, a smaller area called Chillicothe. In Chillicothe, Missouri, we were playing at this venue called the Clubhouse. So we're like, oh, cool. It's not like a VFW hall or a Knights of Columbus, so it's probably going to be pretty legit, because this was all a self-booked tour, and we were with a band called Kingmaker that was relatively popular from Illinois for quite a while. Now those dudes are in a band called Pains, by the way, which is also super sick, super heavy. We were going down, and we're looking for this venue, and our GPS keeps taking us in a circle around a trailer park. And we're like, what the hell's going on here? So we dip out, we go to the Walmart in town to go get food, and we're all sitting around the van eating and stuff. And we're like, okay, we're going to go give it another shot after we go grab some groceries for later. So we went inside, we got some more groceries for later, and the girl checking us out, she looked like someone who would go to a show. So we were like, hey, do you know anything about a show going on in town tonight? And she's like, oh yeah, there's going to be a ton of people there. Are you guys going? And we're like, oh yeah, we're in one of the bands. We're from pretty far away, and we don't know anything about the venue. And they're like, we asked her to confirm the address. She did. She's like, yeah, that's the right place. So we go back to this trailer park, and we see a bunch of dudes with long hair loading out into a trailer with gear. And we're like, yo, where's the show at? We're looking for a place called the Clubhouse. And they're like, this is it. It's a double wide trailer. And we're like, oh. So we get out and we check it out. And inside this double wide trailer, it's hollowed out. All the walls are taken out. So it's just an empty tube with a stage at one end and a bathroom at the other end. And it's covered in graffiti. It looks pretty sick. So we're like, damn, this is probably going to be pretty wild. One thing leads to another. And over the course of the night, we realized the reason it's called the Clubhouse is because it's actually a biker club's clubhouse.
Oh, wow.
So all these dudes that have matching vests with the same patch on the back are rolling in. There's 40 of them. And they're big, intimidating biker gang type dudes. And throughout the night, basically, I was offered meth. I was offered to bang their prostitute girlfriends, as they called them, for money, which I was like, I'm not into it, and I don't have money because I'm on tour. So that's not really how it works. All the other members of both bands that were on the tour got the same offer at one point or another. It was just super crazy uncomfortable. And the drunker the bikers got, the more abrasive it became. The saving grace to this entire thing is that the show was packed. The trailer was full. There had to have been 180 kids there outside of the bikers. So it was by far on that 3-week tour, the most popular day we'd played. So we're like, okay, we're just going to power through. We're going to do it. So we played our sets, we loaded out, everyone got in the van. Everyone was traumatized. And they're like, you know what? We could leave. We don't even need to ask the promoter for money. We can just go. And I was like, no, we did it. We have to get paid. So I go inside and I'm like, hey man, we got to go. We won't be able to hang out for the after party. Can we grab our guarantee and get out? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. They give us a big wad of cash, 50% over the guarantee we asked for. Plus we sold merch that night. So once again, our most profitable show on the entire tour, but also most uncomfortable. So we just jet, right? And we're going, we go back to the Walmart, because a rainstorm starts happening pretty heavy. And we're like, we'll just park and let it sit, because we can't see 20 feet in front of the van. And then the wind picks up and tornado sirens start going off. Jeez. Well, as we're pulling through the parking lot, there are shopping carts flying. They're slamming into the side of the van, slamming into the trailer. We pull around the side of the Walmart and get as close to the wall as we can. And then we're like, okay, we're going to run inside, and that's where we're going to stay. So on the back passenger doors of vans, they have this little pop lever, right? It's not like a normal handle, but all you do is pop it and then you push to open it, right? Just like any other door handle. But we're like, 1, 2, 3, go. As soon as the drummer of the other band popped open the latch, the air sucked it, and it opened up so fast and so quickly that it broke the safety, and it actually slammed into the front passenger door.
Oh my God.
So it broke both windows.
Jeez.
And we duct taped black trash bags in there to try and keep the water out of the van, took all our stuff and hid inside a Walmart for 9 hours until it was okay for us to go.
Jesus.
Yeah, we pushed together tables in this little like subway that was in the middle at the beginning of the Walmart because they didn't bring the fence down. So we pushed together a bunch of tables and made beds, and we were sleeping in the subway. And then somebody forgot to empty out the cookie container before they left. So we borrowed some of the Subway's cookies also on our way out.
That's an awesome story. Do you have any other stories you'd like to share?
I think that's probably like the biggest one, and that's definitely always my go-to. You know, like we've had some like in Common Choir too, we've had some like dumb ones where like we used to have a drummer who was really irresponsible. He's not our current drummer, but one time we went to play a show, like a little local type music festival / benefit show in the Quad Cities, Iowa, Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like 7 hours south of where we live up here in Minneapolis. He was always like on the verge of getting fired from every job he had somehow magically. He didn't tell us. We were planning on staying the night because it's such a long drive. So we got a really cheap hotel and we were going to camp out for the night and then drive back in the morning. Well, we get down there and we play the show, and right after our set, he starts jamming his drums directly back into the trailer. And we're like, what's the rush, man? What's going on? Like, we're going to be here all night. And he's like, no, man, I got to get to work in the morning. I got to be back by like 6 a.m.
Jeez.
And it was like already 8 o'clock at night. We've got a 7-hour drive to get home. So basically I ended up pulling like an all-nighter / all day. Like I was up for like 24 hours so I could drive the van down and back up after playing a show. It was insane. That sucked really bad.
Thanks for sharing those stories. I know people love hearing other bands' road stories because everyone's got a tale, you know?
Absolutely. Oh, I mean, it's hard not to have one if you're traveling for any reason.
Speaking of like live performances, what are some of your favorite songs that you guys play off your discography?
I really, really like our song Negation Delirium. Is super fun to play. It's a really old one. It's the first song on our first EP. It's super simple, but it's got good energy and people respond to it really well. And it's just fun for me to play for that reason. We have a single called Roman Hands that we put out like a year ago. That one's super fun. It's the first song where I actually do any kind of clean singing in our discography. Mm-hmm. That's kind of cool. And it's got a lot of energy. Once again, it's really raw. People seem to connect with it. You know, people just go crazy when we play that. I don't really have a favorite on Gravemind. Like that entire EP, we purpose built based on all of our favorite parts of our old stuff, right? We were like, how can we do it better and bigger and cooler? And I like playing that entire EP end to end. It's amazing.
Yeah, I like asking because, you know, people that want to get into your band, they want to know like what songs do you really like? That way they can get into the band easier.
Yeah, no doubt.
You know, with your writing process, I'm assuming that you write all the lyrics for the band?
I do. Yeah. So I write all the lyrics, and actually a lot of them come from stuff that I write ahead of time. I have like my notes app on my phone. Like whenever something pops into my head, I'll jot down ideas and stuff like that. And then I have a big stack of notebooks where I'll handwrite stuff too if I'm like sitting around or we're on quarantine like this.
As far as the other members, do you guys collectively get together and kind of write together, or do they kind of write the music on their own?
It's a bit of a blend of both in that, so our guitarist Chris, for example, whenever he comes to us with riffs that he's written, he'll generally kind of map out a majority of a song, if not an entire song, like with the entire guitar structure ahead of time. And then we'll bring it together and we'll jam it or we'll pre-record it. That way our drummer can really learn it and hone in on exactly what he wants to do. Right. Mm-hmm. So one of the big things that we do that we feel keeps us tight is we do everything to a click always. We always play to a metronome live when we record, obviously, but even when we write. That way we make sure everything sounds and is in perfect time. One of the things we'll do is like pre-record guitar riffs on our interface on like my laptop. And then we'll send them to our drummer with a click over it. That way he can write perfectly in time drum parts. And then we'll go back and revisit it and kind of retool and adjust what everyone does to make it a little bit cooler. Mm-hmm. And eventually a song kind of builds out of that.
Since you guys are independent, do you basically record by means of like laptops and interfaces?
For pre-production type stuff, yeah, absolutely. Like we'll pre-record all of our own songs, use them as reference material. When we actually record, like for Gravemind, for example, we actually recorded that with Nick Pocock, who is the guitarist of another metal band here in Minneapolis called In Search of Solace. And they're on Sharp Tone Records. So
wow,
they're a relatively new addition, but they're a Minneapolis band that's really breaking right now. And Nick is an awesome studio engineer, and he's really good at working with us too, because he knows kind of what we like. He can direct us to make sure that we're we're both on the same page.
Are you guys going to try to stay unsigned, or is that just the way it's been?
I mean, it's kind of just the way it's been. I mean, we've had offers in the past, but for the most part, we don't really necessarily see the need at this point. Like, we all work outside the band, so we have our own money. And at this point, even the band is generating a pretty decent amount of income, enough to like subsidize a lot of what we do. So if we can get the hobby to where it pays for itself, then after that, we can start looking at the really big picture, like where do we need major support in order to do something really, really big, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's really where a label comes in. So for us, it necessarily wouldn't be advantageous for us to get caught into a contract or something like that, because we have the ability to self-fund, any kind of tour or stuff like that on our own.
It's kind of like a either or type thing, but I think it's very important to have that independent vibe, especially in the community.
Yeah. I think too, like once the opportunities or the scale of things that we wanted to get involved with, once they got big enough, then at that point, we'd probably be like, yeah, we need a label support because we need that type of manpower, that type of expertise. They can do things we can't. It would be too much for us to be like, we want to get signed now because, we don't have that big of a following on our own, right? I mean, we do well, and people, I think, are starting to pay attention to us, but, we're not big cheese or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Like, as far as music that you listen to, do you have any guilty pleasures that you're not proud to admit that you listen to?
I don't have any guilty pleasures that I'm not proud of per se, but I certainly have like guilty pleasures that are like, I guess I don't go out of my way to advertise them, right? Mm-hmm. So like for a long time, I'm really into like Grimes, Hello Goodbye, stuff like that is always kind of cool. I actually listen to more soft, mellow stuff than anything else. I'm really into Miley Cyrus's newest EP, for example. Mm-hmm. I love that EP. Since I listen to that stuff more than I listen to metal, actually, for me, it's not necessarily a guilty pleasure, but it's definitely not something that I like go to every show and I'm like, yo, dude, did you check out the new?
Yeah, I understand that. Do you think that you kind of do that so you don't inadvertently pull from, another metal band?
Maybe. In some ways, I think that definitely, I mean, it certainly makes me feel like my perspective is fresh a lot of times when I'm working on or giving input into the music that we write. And, certainly if you're super heavily influenced by something that's already happening, right, then you're liable to fall into the same rotation, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the snake eating its own tail type of thing. Yeah. So I think it's cool to bring, outside perspective in for that reason. And I really appreciate like actual pure pop music that's made for the purpose of being pop music for that reason too, right. Because it also helps me understand like musically, like if I look at it from a business perspective, the zeitgeist of like what people are into and why, right? Like how do I make my music accessible to the most people while still staying true to who I am as an artist?
That's interesting that you said that. I like that take. I feel like some bands, they're kind of jaded as far as like, is my band a business, you know what I mean? Or, my band more of an art form. And I think that you kind of have to treat it as a business and, make it accessible. And I would say like song structures and stuff like that. A lot of song structuring can be really terrible. And the whole point, I feel like, in a song is to have that catchy appeal. You want people to come back and revisit your songs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a pretty big, even if you're purely only doing music as a hobby, I think it's silly to not think of it as a business, because in my experience, the reason why most bands fail is something business related, right? Like they don't feel like they're getting appreciated enough because they don't have enough hype, or they don't feel like they're making enough money, so they're sinking too much of their personal time and money into it, right? Mm-hmm. All those things are attributing factors to why people end up quitting music in the first place. So if we treat it like, a business without taking ourselves too seriously from the very beginning, then we can balance those things and make sure like, hey, we're being successful enough. That way we're happy and we're entertained and we feel like we're extracting value from this outside of just generating music. But also, once again, we're true to ourselves as musicians, right? I think both can exist, but a lot of people, I think, like you said, are confused about that or, refuse to accept that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the balance is very important. I think that's something that you guys definitely have. You guys definitely have a balance. You can tell that you guys write stuff that you enjoy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to start kind of wrapping it up. We're almost at that hour mark. So I wanted to ask you, what is one thing that you would like to change about the metal community?
I mean, it's probably pretty commonplace to say this, but I think elitism or creating any kind of exclusivity to music, I think is bad. It's terrible. It's really bad for us as a metal community or as a scene or however you want to modify it, right? Whether it's locally or nationally or anything like that. If you limit the people who have access to what we do, then eventually we're just going to go extinct, right? Just like, the dinosaurs or any other, endangered species. It's things are going to go that way. So I think we need to be inclusive to, ideas, people, even the potential idea of calling someone like a poser, right? Like the idea of saying something like that, or, I'm sure there's a less cheesy way to label it. But I think if we could abolish that thought process and just be cool with anyone being involved in any capacity that they want to be inside this, then we're all going to be more successful, and we're going to, actually leave a scene behind for, the people who are our age, 45, 50 years from now when we're old as crap and or dead.
And it's funny that you say that, because when people think of like metal elitist, they usually think of like Slayer fans, like Metallica fans, stuff like that. But now I'm seeing it's more like you're not real emo, and there's a lot of gatekeepers now in these subgenres, which is really weird. I never expected in a million years to see this.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can even say like Common Choir experienced that for quite a while, right? Because we weren't heavy enough to play with the heavy bands, and we weren't light enough to play with, the other, all the other subgenres. So we fell into a weird middle ground for a really long time. But I think once we broke all those barriers down and just, being friends with people and showing how we can add value to each other, I think that a lot of that stuff's kind of gone away. So I think if that could happen on a grand scale for everybody, and we could just get rid of that gatekeeper mentality, everybody would be happier and have a much better time with what we do.
Dude, very well said. I appreciated all your, advice and all your comments. I really appreciate everything that you had to say on the show. I think you're going to bring a lot of value to the community as far as like how open-minded you guys are and how accepting you guys are.
I sure hope so. I mean, if we can do anything at a minimum, if it could be that, then I think we'd all be happy.
If we can just get more people like you, we'd be in good shape.
Well, more people better than us, but certainly, I'm happy to be a starting point, a baseline.
Well, since we started in a fun way, we're going to end this thing in a fun way. And I'm going to ask you the final question.
All right.
If you had the world's attention for 30 seconds, what would you like to say?
I mean, it's pretty obvious that I would say one of two things. One, Bush did 9/11, for sure.
Right.
Or I would follow that up by saying, everyone needs to take themselves a little bit seriously, right? Just chill, have fun, be happy. It's not hard, it's a decision, and we can all make it pretty quickly.
Nice. It's been a blast, man. It's been a great time having you on the show. I really appreciated everything that you had to say. So would you like to leave behind any final thoughts, anything you want to tell the viewers about your band, anything you want to say before we head out?
Like I said, our new EP, Gravemind, is on Spotify. It's on YouTube. It's everywhere you can get digital music. So please, if you're listening, look up Common Choir, look up Gravemind, check out our new EP. Let us know what you think. I'm super happy that you invited me/us to be here. Super thankful for the opportunity. It's been great talking to you. It's always cool to meet, especially in different areas, to meet people who are so far apart but still so like-minded, right? And I think that's the great thing about our music scene, and we can make it better if we work together.
Very well said. So that was Zach Fulton, the vocalist from Common Choir, metalcore band from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Go check out their newest release, Gravemind, like he said, available on all streaming platforms. Thanks again for being on the show. Well, that pretty much does it for today's episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Please like the video and subscribe. That way you don't miss a new episode of Native Diamond Podcast. And until I see you guys on a future video, shine on.
Hell yeah.